Hello, and welcome to ICN Informed Citizen News, November 30th, 2008. Every Sunday, ICN will broadcast the most critical economic, political, and social news that you didn't see or hear in the headlines. We present news that affects all Americans, whether you are liberal, conservative, or anything in between. Let's begin with our top story of the week, and it should be no surprise that we begin with the economy. Most of you probably heard that the second largest U.S. bank, Citigroup, had to be rescued this week. You, the taxpayer, gave Citigroup $30 billion and are guaranteeing $270 billion of their toxic debt. This is what you didn't hear. The U.S. Treasury, Federal Reserve, and FDIC scrambled to finish the bailout package at midnight on Sunday evening in an effort to avoid a global meltdown when the financial markets opened Monday morning. This is at least the sixth Sunday night maneuver by the U.S. government to forestall a global economic collapse in the past 18 months. Citigroup's exposure to derivatives caused this week's havoc, but they are not even the largest holder of toxic debt. Bank of America and J.P. Morgan have much larger exposure to derivatives, and it is likely that they and many others will need similar taxpayer rescues. Here is what you need to know. In the last 18 months, the taxpayers' financial bailout of Wall Street is the most expensive single expenditure in American history. You might want to sit down for this one. Bianco Research has calculated that the Wall Street bailout has already doubled the total cost of World War II, adjusted for inflation. They also said that the financial rescue has required more than the total combined costs in today's dollars of the Marshall Plan, the Louisiana Purchase, Korean War, Vietnam War, and the entire historical budget of NASA, including the moon landing. It is hard to track the total cost to current and future taxpayers. The informed citizen must be aware of the larger picture when hearing about these Wall Street bailouts. Your congressmen are committing you and future generations to paying this money back. In our next story is the Federal Reserve mortgaging its future. According to Bloomberg News, the Federal Reserve has doubled its balance sheet over the past 12 months. What does this mean? Jack Willoughby, senior editor for Barron's Financial Weekly, wrote this week that if the Federal Reserve were a commercial lender, it could be a candidate for receivership. This means the FDIC would step in to close the bank and sell the assets. But the Federal Reserve is the central bank for all banks in the United States Federal Reserve System, and the regulations don't apply. The article goes on to quote Gerald P. O'Driscoll, a senior fellow at the Cato Institute and former vice president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, and he states, "The Fed has spooked the market with scare tactics and ever-changing plans. The Fed's actions, coupled with the Treasury's bailout of the banks, have taken us one big step closer to corporatism. Big business in cahoots with big government." In other news, another mint suspends sales of gold and silver. Here is a story that has received no attention in the mainstream media. The Western Australian government's Perth Mint has suspended all sales of gold until at least January of 2009. The Perth Mint joins the U.S. Mint, Mexico, and European banks in suspending sales of gold bars and coins. Perth Mint sales and marketing director Ron Curry said the unprecedented demand has forced the mint to cease orders until January. With staff working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, over 3 shifts to meet orders. He said Europe was leading the demand, with Russia, Ukraine, Middle East, and U.S. all buying, making up 80% of its sales. There's a very interesting story out of South Dakota. Again, not a word in the mainstream media. Before we jump into the story, the ICN viewer must know that fiat money is defined as not having any real value other than government mandates that it be used as money for payments. As an example, the US dollar is a fiat currency. With that in mind, a new bank called Free Lakota Bank, located within Lakota Indian tribal lands, is issuing a 100% silver and gold-backed currency. It is a non-reserve, non-fractional reserve bank. What this means is that Lakota money is real gold and silver, as opposed to the fiat currencies like the US dollar and all other global currencies. Lakota money will be competition to all other currencies in the world which are not backed up by anything. It will be interesting to see if there will be a legal battle that pits the Lakota Tribal Nation's sovereignty against the U.S. government's need to enforce the use of its fiat currency, the U.S. dollar. Stay tuned. Now to health news. Bloomberg News reported that U.S. Food and Drug Administration scientists submitted a letter to Congress that indicated top managers with the FDA corrupted and interfered with scientific reviews of medical devices. The FDA has repeatedly come under criticism from current and former agency scientists who have said that management forced them to change findings critical of drugs being considered for approval. Now agency employees have informed Congress that managers ordered, intimidated, and coerced FDA experts to modify their scientific reviews, conclusions, and recommendations on devices. Congress sent a letter to FDA management, which included claims that the FDA scientists who opened to the management practices, quote, have been subject to reprisals, including removal or threatened removal and illegal or inappropriate employee performance evaluations. In our next health-related news, The Washington Post reported this week that the FDA failed to act after discovering trace amounts of the industrial chemical melamine in baby formula sold in the United States. The controversy started 2 months ago when Chinese manufacturers deliberately added the chemical to watered-down formula to make it appear to contain higher levels of protein. More than 50,000 Asian infants were hospitalized and at least 4 died. The test results were unearthed by the Associated Press, which had filed a request for records under the Freedom of Information Act. FDA spokesman Judy Leon said that the amounts discovered are safe and that parents should continue to feed formula to their children. We know that trace levels do not pose a risk whatsoever, she said. That contradicts the agency's recent statement about melamine, including a position paper that was on the FDA's website Wednesday that asserted there are no safe levels of melamine for infants. The document stated that the FDA is currently unable to establish any level of melamine and melamine-related compounds in infant formula that does not raise public health concerns. This was not a good week for the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Heard of genetically modified food, otherwise known as GMO? The Daily Telegraph of London reported this week that genetically modified corn has been linked to infertility. A long-term feeding trial commissioned by the Austrian government found mice fed on genetically modified corn had fewer offspring and lower birth rates. A press release from the Austrian Agency for Health and Nutrition said, the group of mice given a diet of genetically engineered corn saw a significant change in fertility. Most of the research on GM crop safety has been conducted by biotech companies, such as Monsanto, rather than outside independent laboratories. The article stated that Monsanto press offices in the UK and USA were unable to provide a comment on the findings. CropGen, which speaks for the biotech industry, claims GM crops have been accepted as safe by government authorities on both sides of the Atlantic. Does that reassure you? Finally, do frequent mammograms help or hurt? The Journal of the American Medical Association published a report that investigated the increase of breast cancer when frequent screening is introduced. It turned out the group of women that were not tested had lower rates of breast cancer after 6 years. The conclusion of the study was not that the mammograms caused the increased instances of breast cancer, but that it raises the possibility that the natural course of some detected breast cancers is to spontaneously regress. Simply put, it appears that some breast cancers simply go away on their own, healed by the body's own immune system. Breast cancer is the second leading cause of death in American women. ICN knows it is important for you to be informed about your health so that you can know the facts when you consult with your doctor. Thank you for spending a few minutes of your busy day with ICN. As you can tell, we're not here to entertain, but to inform. Join us next week as we bring you the news you should have heard but didn't. Please send your friends and family the link to our broadcasts on YouTube. From all of us at ICN, hope you had a great Thanksgiving. See you next week.